She told me she was going away alone. I didn't question it when she packed the sandals she only wore to beach towns. I didn't say anything when I saw the razor on the edge of the tub, the one she only used when she cared about what she looked like under the surface. I even nodded when she said she needed space to breathe and reclaim something deep inside. Sure, reclaim away. But what I didn't expect, what actually gutted me, was the dishwasher. 3 hours after she left, I went to clean up the kitchen like I always did, like the boring husband she said I was becoming. But when I opened the dishwasher, I stopped cold. 2 wine glasses. Not just any wine glasses. The big ones we save for guests. We hadn't used them in months. And yet, there they were. Still wet, like someone had loaded them in a rush. She told me she was detoxing, preparing for her solo self-reflection weekend. But there was that familiar red lipstick stain on the rim. The same color she wore on our anniversary, back when she still remembered them. And here's the kicker. The other glass. It had fingerprints. Not hers. Too big. Too clean. Like someone who doesn't do dishes often. That's when my hands started shaking. I didn't say anything. I didn't call. I didn't accuse. Instead, I walked upstairs, opened her closet, and took out the shoebox I hadn't touched in years. The one she told me to throw away. The one with the letters. And by the time I got to the 3rd envelope, everything unraveled. Everything. I sat on the edge of our bed for what must have been an hour, just holding that shoebox. The air felt thick in the room, like it was trying to suffocate me without being obvious about it. I hadn't opened that box since our 2nd year of marriage, back when we still believed in handwritten anything. She used to leave me notes under my pillow, on post-its inside my lunchbox, even scribbled in the margins of old receipts. You're my safe place. I missed you in the shower this morning. Let's never be boring. I kept them all, even the dumb ones. She said it was sweet at first, then later she said it was obsessive. That's when she told me to throw them out. I didn't. I just hid them. In that same box. Behind the winter boots she never wore because cold makes her soul shrink. I opened the lid and felt like a thief in my own home. They were all still there, dozens of tiny pieces of who we were before she got so busy finding herself. At the bottom, folded in quarters, was one I'd forgotten even existed. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even kind. It was an apology. The only one she'd ever given me in writing. It was dated 4 years ago, the time she accidentally forgot our weekend trip to the lake. The same weekend I later learned she'd spent in Portland at some wellness thing with her old high school friend, Jonah. I remember that name like a splinter under my nail. She swore it was platonic. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. I swallowed my doubt like medicine I hoped would work if I took enough. But the letter? The letter didn't match her version. It said things like, I didn't mean to get caught up in it again, and it's not your fault I keep needing more. Again, that word. It rattled in my chest like a loose screw. And that was the moment I stopped being the patient husband, the understanding one, the pushover with his mild manners and his hopeful little heart. I didn't throw the letter away. I didn't burn it. I tucked it into my wallet, zipped it up, and placed the box back exactly as it was. If she wanted to play it like nothing happened, then so would I. For now. But I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to return from her inner journey, while my gut screamed every time I looked at the wine glasses. I needed to know the truth, and I knew exactly where to start looking. It's strange how silence can sound like betrayal. The way the house creaked at night suddenly felt like footsteps. The hum of the fridge felt like breathing that wasn't mine. Every tiny sound had a weight to it, pressing on my chest while she was away, reconnecting with herself. I couldn't sleep. I tried. I lay on her side of the bed at one point just to see if it smelled like her. It didn't. It smelled like old detergent and lies. So I got up and made coffee at 3:12 a.m., which was exactly when I remembered something I probably wasn't supposed to. When Ren first started coaching people on emotional realignment, whatever that meant, she'd asked me to help set up her email automation system. She's not exactly tech-savvy, and I wasn't exactly busy. I created a Gmail for her public coaching stuff, linked it to a few apps, set up filters, did all the admin things she didn't want to touch. I never thought about it again, until now. Until the letters. Until the wine glasses. Until I needed answers more than I needed sleep. I logged in using the same password she gave me 2 years ago, liberate_me89. In hindsight, that should have been the first red flag. To my surprise, it still worked. My stomach dropped the second the inbox loaded, not because of what I saw, but because of what I didn't. Nothing. It was clean. Like, obsessively clean. No unread messages. No spam. Even the trash folder had been emptied. For someone who used to let 700 notifications pile up on her phone without blinking, this was suspiciously sterile. But here's the thing. She forgot about Google Drive. People forget that emails leave footprints. They leave attachments, shared docs, history, especially when you're the kind of person who saves every itinerary, every wellness contract, every client form in your Drive. It took less than 2 minutes to find a folder called Roots Retreat, June. Inside were PDFs with names like Shadow Work Intake, Yurt Assignments, and Intimate Energy Practices, Couples Edition. Couples Edition. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. I opened the assignment sheet and scanned the names. Hers was there, Ren Callow. But the column next to it? Partner, J. L. Murrow. I'd never heard the name before. Not Jonah. Not anyone I could recognize. But the worst part wasn't the name. It was the notes column. In scribbled handwriting, likely from a scanned sheet. Room number 3. Please accommodate for shared space and dietary sink. Returning couple, open energy. Returning. That word again. So she had lied. Again. But this time, she didn't just sneak around with some guy. She registered him. Booked a shared yurt. Ate carefully curated Ayurvedic meals beside him while I was here wondering why the hell our bed felt so empty even when I was in it. My hands were shaking again. I kept thinking maybe I was overreacting. Maybe partner was just how they paired people for the exercises. Maybe it was all some innocent spiritual crap. But returning couple? There was no maybe anymore. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. I didn't cry. Not yet. Something colder took over, like my soul had left the room and told my body, handle it. So I did. I printed the page, folded it carefully, slipped it right next to her old apology letter in my wallet. I didn't know what I'd do next, but I knew one thing for sure. She thought I'd be here waiting when she got back. She had no idea I'd already started planning my exit. The drive to the co-op grocery store was supposed to be a distraction. I told myself I needed oat milk. Something dumb like that. I didn't even drink oat milk. Ren did. Oats are grounding, she used to say. I used to roll my eyes. Now I was driving through town in a trance, hoping the aisles would give me something useful to do with my hands. Something to keep me from screaming. Or driving into traffic. It was a weirdly hot Saturday for June. The kind of heat that makes you feel tired before noon. I pulled into the parking lot, barely aware of my own body, and walked inside, past stacks of locally grown oranges and handmade lavender soap. Normally, I avoided this place. Too many crystals. Too many smiles. But that day, I wanted to be where she had been. Like tracking the ghost of a woman who hadn't technically left yet. I hadn't planned on seeing anyone. Certainly not him. He was standing by the herb wall. You know the one. The place where they hang rosemary and sage and other overpriced greenery like it's jewelry. He had that look. Loose flannel shirt, bare ankles, sandals, a bracelet made of woven leather and intentional poverty. But what stopped me wasn't the clothes or the man bun. It was the tattoo. Right there on his inner left wrist, in delicate lowercase cursive, Ren. I stared. Too long. He noticed. Gave me a polite nod like I was just another friendly face in a hippie bubble. But I couldn't move. The room got smaller. The air felt sucked out. I don't know what took over me, but I walked right up to him like I was possessed. Nice ink, I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked. Bird lover. He looked at me, puzzled at first. Then something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? No, something else. He smiled, a little too kindly. Something like that. I wanted to punch him. Instead, I just stood there like an idiot while he picked up a bundle of lemongrass and walked toward the checkout. That should have been the end of it. A weird coincidence. A misread. But something kept pulling at me, like the unraveling thread on a sweater you know you shouldn't yank, but you do anyway because you can't help yourself. So I followed him. I know how that sounds. Creepy. Desperate. Borderline criminal. I didn't care. I waited outside near the bike rack, pretending to scroll through my phone, while he loaded his groceries into the back of an old Subaru. That's when I saw it. In the rear window, hanging from the mirror. A dream catcher. The same one Ren had bought at that street festival 2 summers ago, when we went to Santa Fe for our anniversary. The same one she said was too pretty to give away. The same one that disappeared 3 months later when she claimed the dog had chewed it up. I took a photo of the plate. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. but it felt like holding a knife by the handle instead of the blade. I drove home in silence. No music, no AC, just my own breath and the weight of what I'd seen. I knew it in my bones now. She hadn't just lied. She hadn't just left. She'd replaced me, and he had her name inked into his skin like a brand. By the time I got back from the store, I didn't even remember what I was supposed to have bought. I left the car running for a full minute before realizing the keys were still in the ignition and my hands were gripping the wheel so tightly that my knuckles had gone white. I couldn't stop seeing his wrist. That ink. Those soft eyes that looked like they'd never had to beg for love. I hated how calm he was. How untouched. He didn't know the mess he was standing in. Or maybe he did, and smiled at me anyway. Max, our dog, greeted me at the door like I was someone worth waiting for. That hurt more than I expected. I knelt down, buried my face in his fur for a minute, and then just sat there on the floor, surrounded by silence and heat, and the smell of things that were supposed to be permanent. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Maybe for her to call. Maybe for me to wake up. Maybe for some divine sign to tell me I was wrong. That everything I'd pieced together was just the sad fantasy of a paranoid man losing grip. But that sign didn't come. Instead, it was a knock on the door. 3 soft taps. Polite. Almost nervous. I opened it to find Linda, our neighbor from 2 doors down, standing there with a half-eaten loaf of banana bread in a full-covered tray and a twitchy smile. Linda is sweet in that Midwest transplant kind of way, always apologizing for existing, always offering baked goods. I figured she wanted to return Tupperware or ask about the HOA garden again. Instead, she looked surprised to see me. "Oh," she said, blinking. "You're home." "Yeah," I said. "Why wouldn't I be?" Her smile wavered. Ren told me you were flying out to see your brother this weekend." I blinked, confused. My brother lives in Florida. I haven't talked to him since he tried to sell me on a crypto pyramid scheme. Linda flushed. "Oh, sorry. I must have misunderstood." But it was too late. The moment was already unraveling in real time, and she knew it. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me. "When did she say that?" I asked, voice flat. Wednesday?" I saw her walking Max, and I asked if she could water my plants over the weekend. She said she couldn't, that she'd be gone and so would you. That you were doing some sibling bonding or something. Linda winced. She even joked that it was the first time in years you two weren't scheduling around each other. The ache in my stomach turned to something sharp, burning. She had planned this, down to the alibi. She didn't want anyone checking in on me. She wanted silence. Room to move without anyone asking questions. And it worked. Linda wouldn't have knocked if she thought anyone was supposed to be home. I tried to smile. "Thanks, Linda. Appreciate it." She handed me the banana bread like it was some kind of peace offering. "You two okay?" I looked at her for a long moment. Honestly, I don't know what we are anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the dining table with the banana bread untouched, scrolling through my security app's camera feed. We didn't have indoor cams. Ren hated them, but we had one pointed at the driveway. I started scrubbing through footage like I was reviewing evidence for a crime I hadn't admitted was real yet. And there it was. Friday morning, 20 minutes after I'd left for work early for a fake meeting I'd made up to avoid conversation. A man pulled into our driveway in the exact same Subaru I'd seen earlier that day. Same plate. Same dream catcher swinging from the mirror like it belonged there. She opened the door before he could knock. She was smiling. And she kissed him. Not shy. Not nervous. Not like it was new. Like it was routine. Like she'd done it before. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding, but my body numb. There it was. The truth I thought I wanted. But I didn't feel relief. I felt like I'd been erased. I don't know what kind of man vacuums before he disappears, but that's who I became. It wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors. No scorched earth. No passive-aggressive notes left on the fridge. I just woke up the next morning, brushed my teeth like it was any other Sunday, fed Max, and started cleaning. The kind of deep cleaning Ren always said I never did right. I washed the baseboards. I scrubbed under the lip of the sink where grime collects in lazy marriages. I even organized the spice drawer, labeling jars she'd never touch again. It wasn't about making it nice for her. God, no. It was about control, the last ounce of it I had. When someone takes a knife to your life behind your back, you don't bleed all at once. You bleed into everything. Into the routines. The silence. The way your fingers twitch when you open a drawer and find her handwriting on a grocery list you didn't know she wrote. So I cleaned. Because at least that mess obeyed me. I packed light. Just one duffel. I didn't take much. A few clothes, a folder of papers, Max's leash. I left the wedding album on the shelf. Let her explain to her new man why she kept it. Or didn't. I didn't care anymore. I also didn't leave her a note. I didn't want her to have anything to hold on to. No explanations. No closure. She deserved confusion. She deserved to walk through that door expecting a man still willing to wait, and instead find vacuum lines on the carpet and a closet that looked back at her with space. The hardest part wasn't leaving the house. It was knowing exactly where to go. I drove to the old apartment I kept rented under my name. She never knew about it. It wasn't shady, not at first. I got it 3 years ago when we hit a rough patch. I told myself it was just a backup space. Somewhere I could work late without the sound of her sighing every time I breathed too loud. But deep down, I think some part of me always knew we wouldn't last. And I guess I wanted a place that remembered who I was without her. It was empty and cold and smelled like dust and forgotten takeout. But it was mine. No pictures on the walls. No scented candles. No passive-aggressive throw pillows that say things like grateful. Just silence that didn't judge me. That night, I made a bed out of 2 folded blankets and tried to sleep. But my mind wouldn't shut up. I kept seeing her mouth against his hand on her waist, her body leaning into him like muscle memory. It wasn't just cheating. It was replacement. She'd moved on like I was a faulty appliance. Like all I ever was to her was noise. I started drafting an email. Not to her, to myself. I wrote down everything I'd seen. The video timestamps. The drive files. The tattoo. Linda's banana bread. Every detail. Not because I needed proof for a confrontation. No, I just needed to know that I hadn't imagined it all. That my heartbreak had an outline. That the story of how she buried our life deserved to be written down before I burned the rest. I didn't send it. I saved it in drafts. And just before I fell asleep, Max curled up at my side. I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years, a question she used to ask me when we were first dating. If I disappeared, would you come looking for me? Back then, I always said yes. Now, as I stared at the water-stained ceiling, I whispered out loud, no, because I was the one disappearing this time. And I hoped to God she wouldn't come looking. I watched her come home from the security feed. That's the kind of man I had become. Not a husband. Not a hero. Just a shadow sitting in a second-hand chair, watching pixels move across a screen like it was a movie I didn't remember auditioning for. Sunday, 6:42 p.m. She pulled into the driveway like nothing had changed. Music playing, I assumed. Probably something acoustic, sad, and curated. A soft landing playlist she'd downloaded for her return to normalcy. She wore a linen wraparound dress I'd never seen before. The kind that says earthy and free and I'm still spiritual even when I lie. Her hair was up in a loose twist, and she walked barefoot across the porch like she belonged there. Like her absence hadn't split time down the middle. She opened the door. That's when the first pause happened. I knew the moment it hit her. The moment she realized something was off. The rug was vacuumed. Her sandals were gone from the hallway. The air had shifted, not in scent, but in spirit. I hadn't taken much, but I'd taken the right things. The things that made me me. The broken watch from my dad. The signed copy of the book she never bothered to ask about. The 2 mugs I always used. I left the fancy wine opener. The silk robe she bought for both of us, but only wore for him. Every decision I made was surgical. She moved through the house slowly. I could see it in her posture. This wasn't the graceful float of someone returning to her sanctuary. This was someone realizing they were walking into the aftermath. She opened the bedroom closet, paused, walked to the kitchen, stared at the empty dish rack, touched the spot on the table where my laptop usually sat. I imagined her whispering my name like it might summon me. Like maybe I'd just pop out of the garage with groceries and pretend this wasn't what it was. But no, she knew. She knew the way all guilty people know. That instant inner inventory. The backtracking of lies. The mental scramble to rewrite timelines. She walked into the living room and sat down on the couch, barefoot, arms folded across her stomach like she was trying to hold herself together. She didn't cry. Not yet. It took her 7 minutes to call me. I didn't answer. She texted instead. Not a novel. Just one line. Where are you? I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I wanted to say everything. I wanted to send her photos. Screenshots. The video. The folder with the damn yurt assignments. I wanted to tell her about the man at the co-op, about the tattoo, about Linda and the banana bread and the security camera and the dream catcher in his rearview mirror. But what I sent instead was simpler. Don't wait up. She responded instantly. Emery, please, can we talk? I powered off the phone. There's something sacred in silence. It holds power, weight, distance. She'd spent so long filling our space with noise. Lectures about energy, monologues about the universe, calling her toward alignment. Phrases that sounded deep until you looked close enough to realize they were hollow. She had said everything, all the time. But now she'd get nothing. I poured a glass of water in the apartment kitchen, sat by the window, and watched the streetlights flicker on one by one. A family walked by with a stroller. A teenager biked too fast and nearly clipped a trash can. Somewhere in another apartment, someone was laughing at a sitcom. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt strangely okay. She had returned to a house that no longer belonged to either of us. But I had arrived in a space that was finally mine, quiet, unfinished, slightly broken, but honest. The next morning, I'd make my move. Because disappearing was one thing, but becoming invisible to her, that was revenge I could live with. She didn't call again. Not that day. Not the next. I think she realized something most people only learn when it's too late. That silence can be louder than rage. That the absence of a person is sometimes more terrifying than their presence. On Wednesday morning, I drove back, just once, to the house we used to call ours. Not to talk, not to argue, just to leave one final thing behind. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and the neighborhood was still asleep, wrapped in early light and the hum of sprinklers. Max was in the back seat, restless but calm. He always could feel things before I could say them. I parked 2 houses down, walked up the driveway, and placed a single white envelope under the welcome mat she never replaced, even though it was frayed and stained from years of weather and memory. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't look through the windows. I just turned, walked away, and drove off like a man leaving a city, not a woman. Inside the envelope was no letter, no list of her sins, no photos. Just the deed transfer for the house. Signed. No conditions. No request for buyout. No spite. She could have it. The house. The dream catchers. The past. I was building something new now, not from vengeance, but from relief. 2 hours later, I met with the broker about a little cabin upstate. It wasn't much, a fixer-upper with a leaky roof, outdated wiring, and wallpaper that looked like it hadn't been changed since Reagan was in office. But it had land, trees, solitude, and a view of a lake that looked like glass in the morning. I signed the papers by noon. That night, Max and I sat on the porch as the last light disappeared behind the water. I didn't check my phone. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to chase, nothing to wait for. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's second choice. I just felt free.